Some children are left without a family, but some are left for a reason. When the Parkers adopted a quiet little girl from the orphanage, they thought they were giving her a new life. But from the moment she entered their home, the cameras could never capture her face, and they were never meant to. The Faceless Child. The rain came down in curtains the day the Parkers arrived at Rose Hill Orphanage. Julia Parker held her husband's hand tightly as they stepped through the creaking gates, the heavy iron clanging shut behind them. A sense of unease lingered in the air, though neither spoke of it. "Mr. and Mrs. Parker," said Sister Marianne, the head caretaker, her voice as crisp as the cold air around them. "Thank you for coming. There's someone special we'd like you to meet." They followed her into a dim hallway where the flickering lights hummed above old photographs of children long gone. Sister Marianne paused outside a plain wooden door. "Her name is Lily. She's quiet, keeps to herself, but she's sweet, just unusual." Inside, a small girl sat by the window, her back turned to them. She wore a pale blue dress and clutched a worn-out stuffed rabbit. Her dark hair fell past her shoulders in a neat braid. "Lily," the nun said gently, "you have a visitor's." The girl turned slowly. Her movements were delicate, almost too deliberate, like she was mimicking how children were supposed to move. Her eyes met Julia's, and for a moment, Julia felt something cold crawl down her spine. But she smiled anyway. "She's beautiful," Julia whispered. The paperwork was quick, too quick, maybe. Within an hour, Lily was in the back seat of the Parkers' SUV, her tiny frame wrapped in a blanket, her stuffed rabbit perched beside her. It wasn't until they got home that the first strange thing happened. "We should take a picture," Julia said, her voice bright with excitement. "Her first day with us." She raised her phone and snapped a photo of Lily standing between her and Michael in front of the fireplace. They all smiled. Well, at least Julia and Michael did. But when Julia looked at the photo, her breath caught. Lily's face was a blur, not motion blurred, not pixelated. It was as if someone had taken a paintbrush and smeared her features into nothing. "That's weird," she said. "Try another," Michael said, frowning. They took 5 more. All the same, Lily's face was never clear, always a soft smudge, like her identity refused to exist within the frame. "I guess the lens is dirty," Julia muttered, forcing a laugh. But deep inside, her stomach twisted. They didn't mention it again that night. The following days brought more oddities. Lily never cried, never laughed. She rarely spoke unless spoken to, and even then, her voice was barely above a whisper. But every morning, Julia would find her standing in the hallway, facing the wall, whispering things they couldn't understand. Once, Julia leaned in close and heard her say, "Don't let them see me yet." "Who's sweetie?" Julia asked gently. Lily didn't answer, just tilted her head, listening to something invisible. Michael shrugged it off. Adjustment phase. Orphanages can be hard on kids. Still, Julia noticed how the house began to feel colder. The walls creaked even when the wind was still. At night, she heard the faint sound of footsteps in the attic, where no one ever went. One evening, Julia set up a family video to surprise Lily. She arranged a movie night and filmed a little clip of their happy evening. They laughed, even managed to get Lily to smile once. But when Julia played the video back later, She froze. Lily was there, sitting on the couch between them, but her face wasn't blurred this time. It was gone, completely blank. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth, pale skin where features should be. Julia screamed. Michael rushed into the room. She showed him the video. His face paled. It has to be a glitch, he insisted, deleting it from the phone. That's not real. It's just a mistake. But Julia couldn't sleep that night because she remembered the way Lily had looked at her after they turned off the camera, almost knowingly, as if she was waiting. A week later, Julia visited the orphanage to learn more about Lily's past, but when she asked Sister Marianne for Lily's file, the woman grew strangely silent. "I'm sorry," she said. "There's no file. Not anymore." "What do you mean?" Julia pressed. "She was left on our doorstep. No name, no records, and none of the other children ever spoke to her. They said she didn't belong, that she watched them while they slept." "Watched them," Julia whispered. "They said she never blinked." Julia's hands trembled. "Has anyone adopted her before?" The nun hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Twice, but they returned her, or tried to." "What happened to them?" Sister Marianne looked away. "They moved, disconnected their phones. We never heard from them again." As Julia drove home, a storm rolled in. Lightning cracked across the sky. She glanced at the rearview mirror, and for a second, she thought she saw Lily's reflection in the back seat, even though she had left her at home. But the face in the mirror was still blank. The night after her visit to the orphanage, Julia couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. As she lay in bed beside Michael, her eyes stayed fixed on the ceiling, tracing the faint shadows cast by tree branches swaying outside the window. Michael slept soundly, unaware of her growing fear. Down the hall, the soft creak of a floorboard broke the silence. Julia sat up. Another creak, slow, deliberate, like someone was walking barefoot across the wooden floor, just outside their bedroom. She rose quietly, her feet barely touching the ground as she slipped into the hallway. "Lily," she whispered, peering into the shadows. The hallway was empty. Still, she turned towards Lily's room. The door was slightly open. A thin sliver of pale yellow light spilled out from the nightlight inside. Julia pushed the door gently. Lily was standing in front of the mirror, not moving, not speaking, just standing. Her back was to Julia, her arms limp at her sides. The stuffed rabbit sat on the floor near her feet. "Sweetheart," Julia said softly. Lily didn't respond. Julia stepped closer. In the mirror, Lily's reflection was wrong. It stood still like her, but something was different. The head was tilted at an unnatural angle, and the face, even though it should have been blurred like always, was clearer this time. Not detailed, but not empty either. It had shape, hollow eyes, a faint suggestion of a mouth, as though the mirror was trying to remember what she once looked like. Julia's breath caught in her throat. "Lily," she whispered again. The girl slowly turned her head, not toward Julia, but toward the mirror, as if the reflection had called her instead. Then, just as suddenly, she turned back to Julia and spoke in her soft, breathy voice. "They're almost ready." Julia felt a cold wave roll over her. "Who, Lily? Who's almost ready?" But Lily only blinked once and climbed into bed without another word. Julia closed the door gently and backed into the hallway. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the floor. The next morning, Julia tried to explain the strange experience to Michael. She was staring at the mirror for what felt like hours, she said, and her reflection. It wasn't right. It had depth. Michael raised an eyebrow. You mean it wasn't blurred this time? Julia nodded slowly. It looked like her face was trying to come through. Michael rubbed his temples. Jules, we've been under a lot of stress. The adoption, the adjustment, the house. Maybe it's just your mind playing tricks. No, she said firmly. Something's not right with her. Michael didn't respond. He loved Lily. Maybe not in the way a biological father might, but he believed she deserved a real chance, and he wasn't ready to admit something was wrong. That afternoon, Julia decided to do something different. She placed an old Polaroid camera on the table. No digital glitches, no image processing, just a simple photo, one that couldn't be manipulated. Lily, sweetheart, she called, holding the camera. Can I take your picture with your bunny? Just one for the fridge. Lily nodded quietly and stood by the fireplace again, holding her stuffed rabbit. Click. The camera whirred. The photo slid out. Julia waited. The image developed slowly in her hands. She felt her heartbeat quicken. Michael leaned over her shoulder. The fireplace was clear. The stuffed rabbit was visible. Even Lily's dress. But her face, it was missing. Not blurred, not smudged. It simply wasn't there. Like the camera had captured a figure with no face at all. Michael swallowed hard. Okay, that's not normal. Finally, he was beginning to see it too. That evening, they sat at the kitchen table, the Polaroid between them, like a secret they were afraid to touch. We should call someone, Julia said. A doctor, a specialist, anyone. Call and say what? Michael asked. That our daughter doesn't show up on camera, that her face is invisible. She's not normal, Michael, Julia whispered. She whispers to things that aren't there. She watches us sleep. And last night she said they're almost ready. What does that even mean? Michael was silent for a long moment. Then he said, let's put up the baby monitor again, just to watch her room at night. We'll figure this out. That night, while Lily slept, the monitor buzzed softly beside their bed. The video feed showed her lying still, clutching her rabbit. Around 2:37 a.m., the monitor flickered. The screen went dark for a second, then came back. Lily was no longer in bed. She was standing at the foot of it, staring directly at the camera. Julia's heart pounded. The screen flickered again. Behind Lily, faint silhouettes began to appear. Dozens of them, blurry figures lining the walls of the room, unmoving like shadows come to life. And then, all at once, the screen went black. Michael jumped out of bed. They rushed to her room, empty. The window was closed, no sign of forced entry, no movement, just the rabbit on the bed, and something new on the mirror. Words written in fog across the glass, though the air was dry. You looked too soon. They searched the entire house, room by room, but Lily was gone. No footsteps, no noise, no trace of where she had gone. Just silence. Julia collapsed onto the floor, clutching the rabbit to her chest. "She's gone," she whispered. "We saw her face, and now she's gone." Michael didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on the mirror. The reflection showed both of them in the room, and just behind them, a faint, child-sized shape, faceless, watching. The morning after Lily vanished, the entire house felt hollow. The once cozy living room now echoed with a chilling stillness. Julia sat on the couch clutching Lily's stuffed rabbit, her eyes swollen from tears. Michael stood by the window, staring at the driveway as though expecting Lily to return at any moment. But she didn't. There was no sign of her, not a footprint, not a sound, just the lingering message on the mirror. "You looked too soon. I can't just sit here," Julia finally said. "We have to do something." Michael nodded, though his expression was still distant. "Let's go back to the orphanage. Maybe there's anything they didn't tell us." Julia's fingers tightened around the rabbit. "You think they knew?" "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'm starting to think Lily wasn't just another child waiting for a home." That afternoon, they drove to the old orphanage on the outskirts of town. The building looked even more lifeless than before, like time had finally caught up with it. Peeling paint, broken shutters, and a heavy silence that seemed to stretch for miles. They were greeted by the same social worker, Ms. Evers, a woman with silver hair and calm eyes that now held a flicker of nervousness. "You've come back," she said, as if she'd been expecting them. "We need answers," Julia said. "Lily is missing, and strange things have been happening since we brought her home." Ms. Evers hesitated, then slowly stepped aside. "Come with me." She led them through a narrow hallway into a small office filled with filing cabinets and faded photos of children. She opened the bottom drawer of one cabinet and pulled out a file labeled only with a number. 79B. "There is something I should have told you," she said quietly, "but I wasn't sure you'd believe me." Julia and Michael leaned closer. Miss Evers opened the file. Inside were a few documents, yellowed with age. A birth certificate with no name listed under child. Hospital forms signed by different doctors. And at the bottom, dozens of photographs. All of them showed the same girl at different ages, but every single one had the same flaw. Her face was either missing, blurred, or turned away. "We've had her in our system for nearly 10 years, Ms. Evers whispered, "but no one knows where she came from. One day she appeared on the orphanage steps. No note, no name, just that rabbit in her arms." Michael flipped through the photos. "How is that possible?" "She never aged," Ms. Evers continued. "Not really. Sometimes she looked a little older, sometimes younger, and she never spoke until you two came along." Julia's voice trembled. "What does that mean? Why us?" Ms. Evers looked directly at her. "Because she chose you." Driving home, Julia stared blankly out the window. Michael's grip on the steering wheel was tight. "She chose us," he muttered. "What does that even mean?" Julia didn't respond. Her thoughts were spinning. Back at the house, she went straight to the attic. Dust floated in the golden shafts of light as she climbed up. Michael followed behind. "What are you doing?" he asked. "She's been in this house. She's been in every room. If she left something behind, it might be up here." The attic was cluttered with old boxes, forgotten furniture, and seasonal decorations. But in the farthest corner, something caught Julia's eye. A small wooden chest. It wasn't theirs. She knelt beside it and gently opened the lid. Inside were old drawings, childlike sketches on yellowed paper, dozens of them. Stick figures, houses, stars, and in almost every drawing a girl with no face. Some drawings showed her standing in mirrors. Others showed her surrounded by dark, blurry shapes. And in the corner of one picture, scribbled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "They live in the reflection." Michael looked over her shoulder, his voice low. She was trying to tell us something. Julia picked up the last drawing. It was of their house, and in every window there were faceless figures peering out. That night, Julia couldn't sleep. Michael had gone to check the baby monitor again, though Lily's room remained empty. Downstairs, the living room mirror caught her eye. She walked slowly toward it. Her reflection looked normal at first. Then she noticed something off. In the background of the reflection, on the staircase behind her, stood a small figure. She turned, nothing there. She looked back at the mirror, still there, unmoving. Julia slowly approached the glass. The closer she got, the clearer the figure became. It was Lily, standing on the stairs in the reflection, her hands by her sides, no face, but unmistakably her. "Lily," Julia whispered. The girl in the mirror tilted her head. Then, behind her, more shapes began to appear. Blurred figures like the ones from the drawing. One by one they stepped into view. Their faces were empty. Their bodies flickered like candlelight. Julia stumbled back. The mirror surface began to shimmer, as though it were rippling water instead of glass. She turned and ran upstairs. "Michael," she cried. "The mirror! She's in the mirror!" Michael met her at the top of the stairs. "I saw her too, on the monitor, just for a second. She was standing next to her bed, but it wasn't her room anymore. It looked like a different world," Julia finished. They both stood in silence. Then Julia said something she never thought she'd say. "What if we can bring her back?" Michael blinked. "You think we can cross over? She left us clues, the drawings, the message. Maybe we weren't supposed to look, but now that we did, maybe there's still a way to find her." Michael hesitated. "And if we do find her, what then?" Julia looked back toward the mirror downstairs, her heart pounding. "Then we bring her home. Before they do." The next evening, the house was silent, except for the ticking of the hallway clock. Julia stood in front of the living room mirror again, holding one of Lily's drawings in her trembling hand. The image on the paper now seemed more like a map than just a child's sketch. Lines connecting parts of the house, arrows pointing to mirrors, and in the center, a stick figure holding hands with another, drawn inside a large oval that looked unmistakably like a mirror frame. Michael entered the room, carrying a notebook filled with everything they'd learned. Every symbol from the attic drawings, every word Lily had spoken, and notes from their visit to the orphanage. He placed it gently on the coffee table and stood beside Julia. "Are you sure about this?" he asked quietly. "No," she replied honestly, "but she's our daughter, and she's still in there. I can feel it." They had prepared all day, covering every mirror in the house except this one. Julia had placed Lily's stuffed rabbit in front of it, hoping it might draw her closer. Michael checked his watch. "Sunset," he said, "just like the drawing." The light outside dimmed. The last golden rays of the sun flickered through the window. and struck the mirror's surface. A pulse ran through the glass, subtle at first, like the shimmer of heat waves. Then, slowly, the mirror began to darken, its surface turning to a deep, silver mist. Julia reached out. Her fingers brushed against the glass and passed through. She gasped. "It's like water." Michael grabbed her hand. "We go together, no matter what." They stepped forward and vanished. The world beyond the mirror was not what they expected. They were no longer in their home. They stood in a vast hallway that seemed endless in both directions, lined with hundreds of mirrors, but these were not normal reflections. In each one, they saw different versions of their own house, some darker, older, or strangely twisted, like a memory fading at the edges. The air was cold, and their footsteps echoed, though the floor was carpeted. "Where are we?" Julia whispered. "I think we're inside the reflection, a space between spaces." Suddenly, one of the mirrors to their right flickered. In it, they saw Lily, sitting on the floor, holding her rabbit, looking lost. "Lily," Julia cried, rushing toward the glass. But as soon as she approached, the image vanished, replaced by a swirling gray fog. No, come back," she said, pressing her hands to the mirror. Michael pointed ahead. "Look, at the end of the hallway." One mirror glowed faintly, golden and warm, unlike the cold silver of the others. They ran toward it. As they neared, they saw Lily again, this time standing in a room that looked like her bedroom, but older, with vines creeping along the walls and shadows that moved on their own. She looked up at them, but her face was still blurred. Julia placed a hand on the glass. "Lily, we're here. We're coming to get you." Lily tilted her head. For a brief second, her face almost came into focus, but then a dark shape passed behind her. Something tall, thin, faceless. The glass rippled. The figure reached for Lily. "No," Julia shouted. The mirror burst into light. In a heartbeat, they were pulled through. They landed hard on a wooden floor. The air was heavy, filled with the scent of damp earth and dust. They were in Lily's room, but not quite. Everything was faded, like an old photograph. The walls were cracked. The mobile above the crib was still, despite a cold breeze drifting in through a broken window. Lily stood in the center of the room, facing the corner. Julia rushed to her. "Sweetheart, we're here. It's okay." Lily didn't move. Michael stepped closer. "Lily?" She turned slowly. Her face was still a blur, but now it was shifting, trying to form something. Features flickered, eyes, a nose, a mouth, but never fully appeared. "She's stuck," Julia whispered. "Something is holding her here." The floor creaked behind them. Michael turned. Standing in the doorway was one of the faceless figures from the mirror, tall, cloaked in shadows, its outline flickering like a faulty signal. More began to appear behind it, stepping out of the dark hallways, gliding silently. "They're coming," he said. "We need to get out. Now." Julia scooped Lily into her arms, but the moment she did, the floor began to shake. The air turned icy. The figures advanced, their presence draining the light from the room. "We can't leave the way we came," Julia said. "The mirror's gone." Michael remembered the attic drawing. one that showed a figure escaping through a circle of light. "The rabbit," he shouted. "Give her the rabbit." Julia placed the stuffed toy in Lily's arms. The moment it touched her, Lily's body glowed faintly. Her face began to come into focus. The shadows screamed, not with sound, but with pressure. A wave of invisible force slammed into them, knocking Michael back. A mirror appeared on the far wall, golden, glowing, their way out. "Go," Julia screamed. "Now." Michael pulled himself up and ran toward the mirror. Julia followed, clutching Lily tightly. The figures gave chase, gliding across the floor, reaching with featureless arms. As they neared the mirror, Lily opened her mouth. For the first time since arriving in their lives, she spoke. Home, they stepped through. Back in their living room, the three of them tumbled onto the rug. The mirror behind them cracked just once and went still. The house was silent again. Julia held Lily close, staring down at her face, fully visible, beautiful. Tears streamed down her cheeks. "You're home," she whispered. Michael sat beside them, wrapping his arms around them both. They were together, but something still lingered in the air, a sense that the mirror world wasn't truly gone, only watching, waiting. The days after their return from the mirror world passed in a strange kind of calm. Lily was finally herself, laughing, smiling, speaking in full sentences, like she had always been a normal child. Her face appeared in photos now, bright and full of life, no longer hidden or blurred. Julia and Michael had tried to settle into their routine again, but things had changed. Within the house and within themselves, they still felt watched. The mirrors in their home were all covered now. Julia couldn't bear to look into one without remembering the hallway of reflections, the shifting shadows, and the faceless figures that had followed them. Sometimes at night, she heard soft whispers when she passed by the bathroom mirror. Lily, however, seemed completely unaware of anything strange. "She doesn't remember any of it," Julia whispered one evening, watching their daughter color at the kitchen table. "Not the mirror world, not those things. Maybe that's a good thing," Michael replied. "Let her live her life in peace." But Julia wasn't so sure peace would last. One morning, Julia found a new drawing tucked under Lily's pillow. It wasn't like the others. This one showed their family, Julia, Michael, and Lily, holding hands, standing in front of a mirror. But behind the glass, another family stood, identical in every way, except their eyes were hollow and their smiles too wide. The reflection, family. Julia's hands trembled. She confronted Lily gently. "Sweetheart, did you draw this?" Lily nodded slowly. "They're still watching," she said softly. "They want me back." Julia knelt beside her. "No one is going to take you, ever again." "But they're lonely," Lily whispered. "They don't have faces. They want mine." That night, Michael set up a baby monitor in Lily's room, just in case. Julia couldn't sleep. Her thoughts kept returning to the mirror they had entered through. Though it had cracked after their escape, a faint shimmer still pulsed within the glass, like something alive was waiting behind it. At 2:13 a.m., the baby monitor crackled. Julia sat up, heart pounding. A voice, faint but clear, came through. "Lily, come back." Michael burst into the room, his face pale. "Did you hear it too?" They rushed to Lily's room. She was gone. The window was locked from the inside. No sign of forced entry. Only the closet door stood slightly open, and on its mirrored surface, Lily's reflection was still there, staring at them. But the real Lily was not. Inside the mirror, Lily stood motionless, her eyes wide. The reflection version of her, cold and still, held her hand. Julia screamed. Michael ran to the closet and pounded on the glass. "Let her go," he shouted. The reflection smiled. Not Lily, not human. Julia grabbed Lily's old drawing, the one that had shown them the path through the mirror. She traced the lines, followed the arrows, and pointed to a corner. "There's still a way," she whispered. "Through the attic." They ran. The attic was colder than it had ever been. In the far corner, the mirror they had found months ago was uncovered. Though cracked, it shimmered softly like it remembered them. They stood in front of it, holding hands. Michael took a deep breath. One last time, Julia nodded. For her, always. They stepped through. The mirror world was darker now. The hallway of mirrors was falling apart, cracks running down the walls. Some frames shattered, others fogged beyond recognition. The air felt heavy, like the place itself was decaying. They followed the sound of humming, a child's voice. "Lily." They turned a corner and found her. She sat alone on the floor of a dark version of their living room, her reflection standing beside her. Julia rushed forward, but the reflection blocked her path. Its face shifted, sometimes Julia's, sometimes Lily's, sometimes no face at all. It tilted its head, observing her, almost sad. "You took her," it whispered in a sapping voice like wind. "She was one of us." "No," Julia said, steadying her voice. "She belongs with us. She's not yours. She was born here, made here," the reflection murmured. "The moment she entered your world, she split. One of light, one of shadow. You kept the light. We were left with the dark." Lily stood and reached for her mother. The shadow Lily reached too. Julia stepped back, confused. "There are two of her." Michael's voice broke the silence. "No, there's only ever been one, but they both want to be whole again." The mirror behind them shimmered. A choice. Lily looked between them. "Who am I?" she asked. Julia knelt down. "You're our daughter. No matter where you were made, you are loved." The shadow Lily hesitated, then stepped forward, merging with Lily in a burst of soft light. Her face became clear. For the first time, she looked whole. She smiled. "I'm ready." They stepped through the mirror, back into the attic. The glass behind them went still, then shattered silently into dust. Michael and Julia held Lily between them, not speaking. Everything felt final. Months passed. Life slowly returned to normal. Lily was bright, joyful, and her drawings returned to simple trees and animals. No more shadows, no more mirrors. One day she handed Julia a picture. 3 figures holding hands under the sun. Normal family. Julia smiled and kissed her forehead. But later that evening, while cleaning, Julia caught her reflection in the hallway mirror. For just a moment, it didn't move with her. It smiled too late, and then it was gone.